Welcome back to my studio. This week we're going to look at what equipment Edward Weston used on his Guggenheim Fellowship. Now, I've mentioned before that I'm a big fan of Edward Weston. I really do believe he was the best American photographer of the 20th century. Far better than Ansel Adams. He has the historic distinction of being not only the first photographer to be awarded a Guggenheim Fellowship, which is a pretty big deal in itself, but he's the first photographer to be awarded 2 years in a row. So we're going to look at what equipment he used to make the photographs, which were about 1,200 photographs in 1 year. He spent 1 year making the photographs, the second year he spent printing them. We're not going to look at the printing. We looked at his printing equipment basically when we did the contact printing video. This one is going to look at what camera equipment he used to make those photographs. So I don't have all the exact same brand as he does, or did, but I have the next best equivalent, and so I'm going to show you quite a bit of what he used. So to start, he had to have a tripod. Now, he used a wooden tripod, a Model A by the brand Reese. Rise. I don't know how to pronounce it. I've never heard it spoken. Just written. Now, they still make the Model A. They make a newer version of the head than the photoplane head that he had. And I used to have one of these tripods, and it was all right. It wasn't really to my working style. So I replaced it with the largest Manfrotto aluminum tripod that matches the wooden one to the same folded length and the same weight. The difference, aside from being made from aluminum instead of wood, is that it doesn't need extension legs to go up to 9 or 10 feet high. That's about 3 meters for you outside of the US. The wooden tripod needed extension legs that were sold separately. So let me grab that tripod, open it up so you can get an idea of its size. Here it is. So you can see, up as high as me, it goes down to my knees, or close to it. So it's a pretty tall tripod, even folded. Let's go ahead and extend the legs. It has 2 extensions on the legs. We're not going to extend all of it, mostly because I've got 8-foot ceilings and it's a 10-foot tripod. All right, as you can see, even just one extension and it's taller than me. So let's open this up. This might be too tall for the camera. Let's shrink this down a little bit, shall we? All right, we're going to leave that at its folded or shortest height. We're going to just kind of get it mostly level. All right, big tripod. Now, he also used an 8x10 view camera. Now, the model that he used was the 8x10 Century Universal. This was a wooden style view camera, but instead of a extension like the Deerdorf, which extends the back away from center and the front away from center when you extend the bellows, the Century Universal stayed stationary on the back, and the front extended one section and then a second section. It was a pretty good design. It was very lightweight, folded up in a clamshell style. The Century brand was purchased by Eastman Kodak, and they reimagined that camera in the 1950s as a metal camera instead of wood to create the Kodak Master 8x10 view camera. And that's what I've got right here. So let's put this on the tripod. And we would have this. So, view camera, exactly like this, only his would be made out of wood. And as I said, the extension would come out of the front, and then again from the front. So nothing on the back actually moves backwards. It's all from the front. So nice design, very sturdy camera. And he also needed 8x10 film holders. So these are double-sided film holders, one piece of film here, one here, and he carried 12 of these for a total of 24 exposures. He often said that sometimes he would drive an entire day and only have one exposure taken. Sometimes he would take all 24, which is a big day for carrying around a camera this size. His camera kit weighed about 50 pounds. So quite a bit of stuff to carry if you want to walk away from the car. He also needed a dark cloth. So the dark cloth is what goes over the hood or the head of the photographer from the camera in order to see the ground glass on the back. There is no eyepiece to look through. It's the 8x10 piece of glass. So he needed something to shade the glass so he could see. So this would sit up here, and this particular camera has little rings that match up with hooks on the cloth, but not every camera has that if you're not familiar with view cameras. And so here he would be under the cloth. If you've ever seen an old movie or a movie where they would have an old one like this, this would just allow him to see the glass. Now his, just like mine, was white on the outside, black on the inside. He used a sateen fabric, 2 layers of black, 1 layer of white. He had a seamstress sew it so that no seam was visible, or rather no seam went through all 3 pieces at the same time. Although I find that completely unnecessary. Little holes along the edge as the pieces are sewn together aren't going to stop you from seeing the ground glass. So I think that was a precaution he didn't really need to take. But overall, this would be it. His was 6 feet by 6 feet, or 2 meters by 2 meters in size. No Velcro on his. He didn't have any Velcro there. Next was the lens. So he had this model lens. This is a Turner Reich triple convertible. It's a 12-inch focal length, which is normal for a camera this size. It's about the equivalent of a 50mm on a 35mm camera. But what a triple convertible does is when it's on the camera, it would be focused about this far away, maybe a little further for a 12-inch, about like that, and that would be focused at infinity. But what this camera lens allows me to do is take off the front, and it just unscrews. And now it's a different focal length. This particular lens, the same model he had, would be 12 inches together, but then it would be 21-inch focal length when it is just the rear element by itself. Then, if you replace the rear element with the front element, it became a 28-inch focal length. So the camera would be stretched out all the way to its max. So this allowed him to have in one compact package 3 lenses. And he speaks about the 12-inch focal length, which is just a normal average perspective, as being violently wide angle. So for him, that was not really a much used focal length. He would use it when space was cramped or he needed to do something up close. What he used most was the 21-inch focal length. And he rarely used the 28, only when he needed to get up close to something he couldn't physically walk closer to. So the 21-inch was his most used focal length. Later on during the year, he added a 19-inch focal length Zeiss Protar lens to supplement. Now, 19 inches and 21 inches is pretty close for you in the metric world. That's about 50 millimeters. Not a whole lot when you're talking about a camera like this. It doesn't really say why he added the 19-inch Protar, but he does say that near the end of the Guggenheim, he realized most of his negatives were blurry. While he saw that early on, it wasn't until near the end that he figured out it was the lens itself, which, coming from a reputable company, on this occasion sent out a dud. He had gone so far as to even get 2 eye exams and new glasses before he figured out it was the lens. Now, I think it was just the 21-inch focal length, and that's why he supplemented with the 19. When it was combined with the 28 to make the 12, he didn't have much of a problem. But just the 21 on its own caused enough focus issues that he supplemented with a close but not quite same focal length of a different brand. So that being his most favorite focal length lens, he probably had a lot of slightly blurry images, unfortunately. And being 1200 negatives, that's a lot of blurry pictures. All right, now let's pull this back in real quick. Let's put this back on. Now, he also used a lens hood, much like this one here, that would go on and just shield the lens from extraneous light in order to reduce flare. But he used a very specific one called a washing counter light cap. And the difference between that and this is that, one, it's metal, not rubber like this, but it had a rectangle cutout to act as a shield from extraneous light. So it had this rectangle cutout, and then it had a built-in lens cap that would just flip down out of the way. I have been completely unable to find an image of this anywhere online to show you what that looks like. I did once years ago, but that source is gone. One day I may be able to find one on eBay just to add to my collection of this was cool at one time. But otherwise, he would have used a lens hood and a lens cap. His just happened to be all in one. Next, he had 3 filters. 2 he started with and 1 he added later. He started with a G and a K2. He added an A later on. Now, when Kodak purchased Rattan, these were renamed, with the K2 being the number 8 yellow filter, the G being renamed the number 15 deep yellow filter, and the A being renamed the 25 red filter. So these he used quite often, this one being the last one to join the group. The 2 yellow filters would have been used very often when only one part of the lens was used. And since we already said the 21-inch was his absolute favorite, he would have used the deep yellow filter, the G filter, in front of the lens almost all the time, and that reduced chromatic aberration from having only the one half of the lens on there. And this would also have darkened skies for a lot of the landscapes that he was taking during this period. But unlike these filters, which are round glass, his most likely would have been square glass, 3x3 inch squares, just like the Kodak Rattan gels, but then sandwiched between 2 thin pieces of glass. And then one other piece of equipment he would carry was the Weston light meter. Weston being the brand not associated with his family at all. This was a British-made product. He, of course, is American, but it is coincidentally his name. Now, this is the model 650, which was the model that was available during the mid-30s when he did the Guggenheim. So it is most likely this model that he would have used. It uses different emulsion speeds than the ISO or ASA that we are familiar with now. Weston did a lot of their own testing to figure out their film speeds. Speaking of film, he used Agfa Isopan, which at the time was a 25 ASA film. Now, we don't know what the Weston brand would have rated it since they did their own film testing, but it probably would have been about 25. But since he also used Kodak D1 or ABC formula to develop the film, that would have cut it in half at least, which would mean he was actually getting an effective 12. And then add to the fact that he's using that deep yellow filter for most everything, that would have cut it down another stop and 2/3. And then since he used a very dilute version of that developer, it could have slowed it down even more, meaning he probably got an ASA somewhere around 3 or 6 for most of the photographs he was taking, which is pretty darn slow, which is also why he used very long exposure times and fought with the wind quite a bit. In addition to all that, he carried a spare ground glass, having had an accident with the corner of one of these cloths having a weight in it, blowing up in the wind and breaking the ground glass. He decided from then on, let's carry a spare. He also had cables such as this to trip the shutter, carrying at least 2 with him at all times because he said they just kept breaking constantly. Then he also carried a spare tripod leg, just in case something went wrong, and extra tripod screws. Other than that, everything was kept into 2 camera cases, one of them at least being painted white because he felt that would reflect the heat better of the desert sun, and then a wooden chest to keep all the film in as a freezer, because back then a cooler wouldn't have been nice like a Yeti. It would have been a wooden box, possibly lined with asbestos. And all of that fit into the car he bought just for the Guggenheim with the money that he got. That was a Ford Model V8 touring sedan, 1937 year. Now he didn't drive. It would have been his wife or one of his sons that always traveled with him, and they went on anywhere from 1 to 3 week excursions, stopping off in between to both replenish their food and camping supplies, and for him to develop the negatives from the previous trip in either his San Francisco base or his LA base. So that's pretty much all the equipment that he used. It didn't take much. Tripod, camera, 1 set of triple convertible lenses, 3 filters, a light meter, and just some spare odds and ends. So if you think that you need a lot of equipment to go out there and make really good photographs, just remember he used pretty much just this right here to make 1,200 of the best negatives out there in photographic history. So there's no reason why you can't go out there with whatever camera you've got right in reach to go out and just make some good photographs. So that's going to do it for this week. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.